Table session. Before we get into a discussion with a number of high officials from the region giving us their take on the conference and potentially thinking very practically about next step toward that new economy for the MENA region, Riyad Artani, who is a tech entrepreneur who's set up startup all around the world, and he's now advising the Wali of Algiers on the smart city project. He's gonna take the floor very promptly, and then introduce his team, which is a very practical example of a problem that they managed to solve locally because they faced some constraint, which were of a financial nature, which triggered quite a bit of an innovation and very entrepreneurial spirit. So this is one example that local talent can deliver on a global scale. Riyad?
Thank you very much, Rabah. Good afternoon. Welcome back. The last couple of days, we've spent quite a bit of time, having very, interesting discussions in terms of startup ecosystem creation, technology ecosystem enablement, and very good ideas like exchange, good debates as far as like what, how, and how to approach things, right? Here, what we're going to be doing in the next like 15 minutes, going to be short but like very focused, is what I would call, at least an experiment to validate a model, that we've put together in terms of like, basically putting together these startups and like, having them basically get built and scale and grow, focus on advanced technologies and doing it with a thesis that we've been trying to put together. So before I get to the startup thing here, really, I mean, this is in the context of the Algiers Smart City project, which in my opinion is more of a mean to an end as opposed to an end. Basically, it's a way to do multiple things within, and we're doing multiple things within with a focus on technology development, technology transfer, and many other things, right? So we really see the Algiers Smart City project as a catalyst project that will put together all the stakeholders in the ecosystem and have them work together in the direction of putting together this technology ecosystem, right? As an example here, when we framed the Algiers Smart City project, we really, went after a specific problem, which at least in Algiers and Algeria, there is a lot going on, but there was a little maybe communication between a lot of them. And we believe that having synergies between all the actors will lead to much better results. So we had research development labs, we had, startups, incubators, accelerators, we had universities, all doing their own things. And when we put the Smart City project, was a platform to have them all work with each other in a very collaborative way. But at the end of the day, one should see that as a mechanism to enable linkages between the actors in the ecosystem. So very briefly, I mean, the project started, I think, about 10, 11 months ago now. Like formally started about 10, 11 months ago. And what you see on the left side is really what we've done. I'm not going to go through it. I mean, just like, to illustrate what was done here. But we really, from the beginning, did a very thorough benchmarking of a lot of the smart city projects around the world. I've been myself involved with few of them in North America and Asia and Europe, working on them. And what we decided to do here is to figure out what's the model that applies to Algiers, how do we put it together with the highest likelihood of success, and how do we go and achieve both the tactical goals and the strategic goals, right? And within the strategic goals, a very important thing was to put together a model that allows us to give a good chance for startups to get built, for teams to get close to the development of high technologies. And more importantly, we really believe that we are in a very special time at the moment where technologies are moving fairly fast, and this dynamic creates the opportunity to leapfrog. So we went with what we call a leapfrog strategy, which means being very smart about picking the technologies we want to work on and train the ecosystem around that will allow us to basically break the linearity and the dependency and get into technologies that will allow us to leapfrog and get up to speed on new things with a better chance of success and better return on investment and a better chance of reducing dependency vis-a-vis new technologies, right? So we've done a lot of these things that you see there. There's a lot of work to do, and this work will go on for years, because this is not something that starts and ends. This is something that keeps going as long as the model is right. We looked at it from different angles. Actually, we put a couple of papers that were presented, and they will get presented again, very soon, that lay out the thesis of how to put together a federating project, like the Smart City project, and have it seen as a catalyst to develop things. And within those things, we have the development of a technology startup ecosystem, right? Within that specific goal, we're doing multiple experiments. So what we're going to be showing now is one out of all these experiments, which came from a real problem. The real problem, about 11 months ago, was we needed to go and, as a team, build a cloud. In this case, a private cloud. There's an extension to a hybrid cloud, an extension to a public cloud as well. I will skip all the details. But we had to go and put a cloud together. And initially, the solution was, OK, fine, let's define the requirements. Let's put a request for proposal, and then go and select a vendor that will devise this cloud. Fine. Then we said, you know what? That's been the normal process of doing things, but let's look at it differently. Is there a more creative way to approach it? And we did step back and looked at the technologies that are coming along that can be taken fairly quickly, be learned fairly quickly as well if one has the right, technology people and linkages with the rest of the world and all that goes around that, and basically build them by ourselves, right? So I listed a bunch of them here. A lot of them are around, the open source cloud like OpenStack, anything big data around Hadoop, anything like artificial intelligence around TensorFlow. I will skip you all the details, but we're talking, multiple millions of lines of code that we took, native, and basically we put together a team of engineers that you see here, at least some of them, for this specific project, out of multiple schools in Algiers. It's about 15 engineers in this specific case. And we said, fine, instead of going and buying this cloud from the typical vendors, which we may do, let's give it 1 year. Let's take this code. It's an open source code, so it's accessible. I mean, within a few minutes, you can have it running here. We have linkages to the rest of the world to basically get information and understand what to do when we need to understand what to do. And then we're going to have all these engineers that you see here basically just work on it, right? And we did. So that was at the beginning. Within a 7-8 months time frame, basically we had the team putting together a whole cloud by themselves that's been running live since then, that has 3 main results. The first one is there was a clear substitution result where we end up not having to buy that, but just using what we've built. That's one. Number 2, it allowed us to basically take that knowledge and put it in the hands of new teams that are basically not even finished school yet. They're finishing school this year. I mean, engineering schools this year in most cases. And so basically having that knowledge and that expertise. And number 3, basically leading to the creation of multiple startups in a number of these areas in a smart city context that are ongoing at the moment, right? So within the 10 months, we had these 3 objectives achieved. And yeah, and it's in progress. This is one experiment of multiple. And that's what I was saying, like, the smart city is seen as like a mean to an end as opposed to an end in itself, right? And so what we're going to be doing right now is basically showing a brief demonstration of all what the team has built and running live commercial in multiple institutions in Algeria right now, right? So I will leave it to colleague Amin from the team and the research development here in Algiers to basically run the demonstration.
Thank you, Riyad. Let me first switch to my presentation, please. I will also switch to French, just to, if you have to put your earphone. So, okay, merci.
Thank you. What we're going to present here is very quickly code that exists here in Algeria, taken as a basis or open source tools. The work has been carried out jointly among several schools here in Algiers and research centers such as CDTA. So what we try to do is to set up the architecture of the platform that is supposed to host all the smart city platform of Algiers. The smart city is a city that captures information and gives back new information with added value to make the difference. So this is a cloud, an Algerian cloud, that is hosted in the Advanced Technology Center that will host all the tools on a new platform in line with these new technologies. So on the platform, the cloud is hosted in the Advanced Technology Center. It started as a private cloud, and then it is migrating into public cloud gradually and according to the interest lent by the users. So to go quickly and not to waste too much time, I move on to the Smart City platform. It has been developed as part of Barcelona Smart City, which was an open source code, and that we adopt and adapted for the city of Algiers. On the platform, we have a cloud that hosts everything, Smart City platform that will collect the data, organize the data, and in parallel, we have the brain of the city that is a big data cluster of AI. And on this cluster, all the computations will be made. So the entire tools that we're using are open source tools that we adopt and improve gradually according to the context. What we're going to see here is precisely the IoT platform, IoT network, the data exchange platform, a big data cluster, and related tools that can feed the big data cluster. We can talk about GIS server, workflow and automation process, and any other data, external data source that can be included in the system. Very quickly, the demo platform is on the cloud, is related to the cloud, with the Sensilo machine, with internal and external networks, and a big data cluster with a database and the whole with the Zookeeper server. I apologize for these details. So this demonstration is about captors that will generate data that are located virtually on the city of Algiers, sensitive places in Algiers, and give data to gateways, which will send the data to an inter-exchange database, which will be a buffer zone between the data generator and the data consumers. Then, from then, we move on to the big data cluster and a visualization in real time. What we're going to see very quickly what we see here is the cloud. This is the administration page of the cloud. What we see here is that we have 140 machines that are working on the cloud. We have resources, computations, disks, and memory. It is basically, these are basically the elementary resources required by any computer system to operate. And we can do so in a very flexible manner that can fit at the best to the interests of the consumer or the customer. And we will identify the bodies that concern us. So what you see here are lines, and each line is a computer. And each computer has an IP address that can be identified. It has a flavor, a key through which we can have access, and an availability zone. So we have as much computers here as much lines. And we have a subset of these computers that form the cluster on which the services that we are going to show you operate. I'm going back to my presentation. What you see here
Voilà. En fait, ça c'est un peu. Alors pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas, c'est la grande poste d'Alger qui se place
This is
the
Grande Poste, the post office of Algiers.
Donc ça, c'est la page d'accueil un peu de la plateforme qui va être en fait les oreilles de toutes les données qui remontent vers la
first page of the platform. On this platform, we have a map, a geographical map of Google, on which we will place captors or detectors, sensors. As an example, this is a sensor at the Grande Poste that will show the temperature
sur la place de la Grande Poste. Donc, directement, on peut aller, donc ça c'est un test.
This is a test. We can go to the Place Oda, which is another place in Algiers, and we can collect the noise there. The idea here is to give an example of what is the use of this tool. We can have as many sensors as we wish, and then collect data where we can classify the data and process the data on the big data platform. This platform has a set of parameters that we can display, we can see, And what you can see here is a set or a group of active sensors that are providing the information or sending the information. We can see the number of requests processed, some 12 million requests, the requests per second, and the users, and we can follow in real time any change in activity, or, if you will, or any change that occur in the city. This platform can be configured. We can include a set of components, of sensors, of gateways. We can have segments of platforms or divide the platforms per area, per zone, to have, for instance, districts, information for each district in a city, for instance. So, from this platform, the data are sent to the big data platform and the artificial intelligence, and then they are sent to a database to classify and archive the information, and then we can have, from this database, we can directly collect the data on.
Donc, si on veut retourner. Donc, on choisit un peu. Et donc là, ce qu'on va, c'est par exemple, on va voir.
For instance, we can, if we want to have all the data on temperature that have been collected from the 11th of January up to now, we have the data. All the entire data will be displayed. This is an example. I'll give back the mic to Riyad.
Yeah. Before finishing, a couple of things very important to summarize. Number one is, all this work been done by all the students here, and it's been done in a very short time frame, and with a very clear return on investment, given what we're planning to do before that. That's one. And number two, what's very important is that things like this would have probably been very difficult to do 3, 4, 5 years ago. Having access to all this open source and these technologies and linkages to the world and running them would have been almost impossible. It is possible today. So we see that as the opportunity as far as how to bring in technology and build things around it and create startups around it. And there's a startup created, and there's a few others coming up, right? Before finishing, I want to have all the students basically just their name and their school and introduce themselves.
Bonjour tout le monde. Voilà, je vais vous présenter.
Good morning to you all. I'm going to introduce to you the team of Smart City. The students come from various universities. There are 3 main different universities, and I will introduce them one by one.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon. I'm Bilal, and from the University of Algiers, Youssef Ben Khadda. Good afternoon. In fact, there are 3 of us, and we are from Algiers One University, Youssef Ben Khadda, and we work on the work chain. That's it. Good afternoon to you all. Yasmin, I'm at the 5th year of electronics. In Polytech Algiers, we work on geographical information system. Bousnama Marwa. I'm also a student at the 5th year of the Polytechnic School of Algiers, and we work on the same project, Wad Ahmadi, from the higher computer school, and there are two of us who work on the smart management of urban traffic in Algiers. Menhani Ali, I'm from the computer school. I work together with my friend Wadah on smart traffic. I'm Belhaj Mohammed Mustafa, industrial engineering faculty. We work on the combination of public works, and we intervene in various areas. I'm Bouhtour Mohammed Nabil. I'm a student in the 5th year of electronic in the Polytech School of Algiers. Thank you.
Bravo, bravo, mesdames et messieurs. C'est toujours très frustrant puisque
it is quite frustrating, ladies and gentlemen. We would have wished that this session lasts longer, and this is a very important project, and these are students from the university, from Algerian universities, and I hope that we will have the opportunity of seeing them and follow up their projects. And this is not only confined to this smart city, but touches upon other projects. And I hope that this session has been enriching for us all. And the last session of our program is this roundtable, which has been broadened to other participants. Now I would like to invite the participants to this roundtable to join us here at the high table, Mr. Abdurrahman Rawia and Mr. Hafid Ghanem, Vice Chairman of the World Bank, Mr. Al-Hamidi Abdurrahman, Director General and Chairman of the Board of the AFM, and Mr. Edouard Sekema, and the Minister of General Affairs and Administration, Mr. Lahsen Daoudi from Morocco, the Governor of Tunisia, Mr. Marwan Al-Abbasi, the Governor of the Central Bank of Libya, Mr. Sadiq Omar Al-Kabir, Mr. Mohammed Al-Maytami, Minister of Industry and Trade from the State of Yemen, Mr. Oman Fahri, former Minister for Technologies and Communication from Tunisia, and Mr. Rabah Arzqi, Chief Economist at the World Bank for MENA. Over to you, gentlemen.
You have to mic them. Faut donner des micros. Merci beaucoup, Siam.
I thank you, Siham.
Tout le monde doit avoir un mic portable ou flottant. Ils ont déjà? Ah, d'accord, c'est bon. OK, bah, merci.
I thank you once again, Siham. Thank you, Riyad. I just wanted to add to this presentation that, of course, it is a technological challenge to sort out this problem, that is the constraints which were faced by Riyad and his team, and it has also been the outcome of this project will benefit each one of us in Algiers. This is a technological challenge which shows to us the way that if we do have the capacities, if we do have the energy to sort out this technological challenge, this will change the life of several citizens And we hope this for the Algiers city. I gave you this example to say that this session is also for us to try to move on to something concrete, not only just stick to speeches and try to promote this new economy that is to be concrete and come up with solutions so that this economy becomes a reality and that it attracts this educated youth and that we stop from being just a market of exports of our skills to other countries, and that these skills be used here and transformed for the transformation of our societies. A very concrete example of partnership thanks to the support of the Ministry of Finance, the Algerian authorities, and of course the Arab Monetary Fund. What we plan to do is to launch a platform, and this will be announced later on in the press conference. And for the bank, it will be a real challenge that it will have chapters per countries, which we will use. We will put into connection all these incubators and startups so that they can work together and so that they can help us overcome the obstacles. We will work together with the authorities at the level of provinces, at the level of ministries, in order for us to be able to accelerate this enthusiasm and this energy. This conference, which Riyadh is organizing in Algiers in June, I have the honor of saying it on the invitation of the Wali of Algiers, the governor of Algiers, and my colleagues Marie-Françoise and Damba will work in order to support this effort. So Algiers platform, this is a concrete result, outcome of this idea of moving on forward and not leave this technological wave overtake us in order to face up this this demographic challenge that we are facing in order to transform it into a force. Without any delay, I will start with a quotation of Robert Solow, the Nobel Prize winner, who is the author of the growth theories, who is saying that we see computers all around. We do not see them in the productivity statistics, and very often when we talk to officials, they'll tell us, yes, good, the sector of technology is very important, but what is the impact in terms of employment, in terms of productivity? Indeed, economists find it difficult to draw from these statistics effects, tangible, concrete effects. It's simply because these computers are all around. They have transformed all the aspects of our professional and personal lives, and at the end of the day, it's very difficult to extract them from the statistic because we cannot measure them. And meaning that technology can be a source of transformation, and most of the time we try to associate the digital sector to the traditional sector, and it is thanks to this digital economy that we're going to transform the traditional sector, improve the quality of services, increase its transparency, and succeed in creating employment and throughout all the sectors of activities. And in order to remain concrete, and once again, this comes from my friend Riyadh, a concrete action is to break this isolation, this idea of being isolated from this world wave which is going through the global economy. economy and this technological transformation to transform this external wave into something domestic and internal, which will help us create employment and see to it that we come to a better society. We must break this isolation, this idea of putting together or putting in relation this national platform and put all this energy into networking will be a concrete element in order to be able to change the present situation. The other point, and then I will open the floor for the panelists, is, of course, the issues related to education. And here, Kamran was telling us that we have to rethink the university, which means that to rethink, reconsider the curricula concretely, to rethink the university. This is what Riyad and his team are trying to show. That is, come up with concrete problems and use students, involve them in solving these problems and putting them in contact with mentors, either local or international mentors, and finally teach them how to solve these problems. And finally, in these universities, create spaces for incubation and for startups, means changing the future of the university system by seeing to it that this university system, which trains very often, which provides a general training, becomes more specific and more focused, and see to it that the university becomes a space of meeting, of encounter between the public and the private sectors, and which will lead to the transformation of the university. And we will have the opportunity later on to speak about things that are taking place here and there. Finance, of course, there has been much talk about payment systems and the difficulty sometimes for this digital economy, traditional economy, which needs to be broadened. We have spoken about the difficulty of having access to modern payment systems, which would allow the acceleration of the quality of services. So this is something that comes out very clearly from the discussion that we have had, to have a financing system which would be in the service of the economy, which would accomplish its missions, as Professor Steinbeck was saying. And, of course, reconsider the physical aspect of this infrastructure, telecom and internet, and that it is necessary to try to understand how, by buying this technology, which comes from abroad, that by buying this technology, that we should not only transfer the technology, but also transfer the know-how. Here, there is an element of capacity, the capacity of countries to identify what their needs are and try to take advantage for doing leapfrogging to the most developed technologies. It could be an opportunity, but it could have serious consequences if we do not understand which technology we should invest in. And very concretely, from the point of view of ministries, it is important to ensure the transfer of know-how, and apart from the costly purchase of these technologies in order to achieve this leapfrog. And this will be the subject of discussions here amongst ourselves, and then we will open the floor to the audience, focusing, of course, on concrete issues, and so that our authorities and also representatives of the IMF and the World Bank could also say. I will start with my boss, my vice president, maybe on the sector of education. but I will leave him free to touch upon other issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabah. I did not expect to be the first to take the floor. It's so much easier to be the last to take the floor, actually. Well, I would like to speak to 4 points with your permission. The first one is the conclusion I've drawn from this meeting. The first conclusion is the importance of this new economy, the importance of digital economy. On the one hand, we have seen, and as we saw this morning, how this technology is changing radically, transforming agriculture. I was really interested in this theme. It was really interesting what we saw this morning, how the agriculture is changing. We knew already that industry was changing, that services were changing. So this is really the future. And it is important that we be aware of these such changes. The second conclusion is when I go through all the presentations, I think of the presentations, and I'll be frank here, it seems to me that we are really lagging behind in comparison to the rest of the world. When I compare where we stand in the Arab world, in the Arab countries, compared to what's happening in Europe, what's happening in India, in China, we are yet a lot to do. This is my second conclusion. The third conclusion, which is linked to the second one, is that we need to act. We need to act, as was said by Rabah, to act on the infrastructure, on education, finance, and as well the regulations, the regulatory framework. We need also to act on this. This was my third conclusion, that is, we need to act. We cannot just remain in silos in comparison to the rest of the world. The fourth conclusion, and this was also mentioned by Rabah, it is very important for us to work on a regional perspective. The regional cooperation is extremely important in this respect. We've heard of ideas concerning the embarking on regional projects, regional interconnectivity, but I think that the idea of creating the Algiers platform, that would be a regional platform where the youth in all our countries can be interconnected, compare their experiences and experiments. This would be a very good experience, that this would be a concrete outcome of this conference, of this meeting. Thank you, Rabah.
Merci, Rabah.
Thank you, Rabah. Thank you, Vice President. For me, these 2 working days that we spent together enabled me to be more aware of all these stakes. On these 3 themes, youth, technology, and finance in the field of growth and employment, during the coming years, we will have to create in our region some 10 million of jobs in order to control our demographic growth, and the digital sector will be a magnificent opportunity to enrich and improve our respective economies. It is true that we are confident that our youth are our best asset in face of such challenges. Our youth has no complex in face of globalization. They should not adapt to it. They have no complex about it, about this globalization, as I said. And they are integrated into it. This is what we notice every day, the increasing share of the use of computers and in our daily life. The issues of technology, the digital divide, etc., are being debated. For most of them have been resolved, but what is left for us is to reinforce the necessary tools to transform the new digital use into growth and employment. To be able to materialize such objectives, our public policies should aim at enabling our youth to express their creativity and their talent through three important thrusts. So the first one is we need to maintain a bold modernization strategy of our infrastructure and reinforcing the local storing capacities in partnership with the major actors of the digital industry to fast-track the innovative efforts by simplifying the measures to create startups and facilitating their financing, which was one of the aims of the seminar, and the rapid deployment of the dematerialized mode of payments in order to reach the optimum levels of security. Of course, at the regional level, the creation of this Algiers platform will be one of the best examples of it. I thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to extend my thanks to the State of the Republic of Algeria for the gracious hospitality, and I would like to thank you also for being patient or for remaining with us for the second working day, which would embolden us in convening other such meetings and seminars. And my impression is that it was a very positive seminar, and the issues that have been debated are very topical. I would wish to refer to one of the initiatives that have been carried out by the Arab Monetary Fund. We know that one of the challenges faced by all Arab countries which are members of the Arab Monetary Fund is the challenge of unemployment, especially the youth unemployment. Therefore, one of the initiatives taken by the Arab Monetary Fund in cooperation with several institutions, including institutions present here, such as the World Bank, is the initiative of the financial that aims to work with all the Arab countries and to enable them to address the issue of unemployment, to have them access to financing and help them create jobs that will enable youth to enter the labor market through the use of techniques, as it was referred to during these 2 working days, or to create conducive environment for the creation of SMEs, and also the financial education, which is a very important issue. We need to start the schooling or the financial education at the first schooling years. We have very ambitious projects, but if the financial sector is not up to the expectation, is not in line with the progress of the other sectors. If there are difficulties to have finance, I think that it would be very difficult for us to have such an empowerment. Therefore, this initiative aims at having initiatives by the financial institutions. I'm not referring to the public sector. They do they spare no effort and they do whatever they can, but I'm referring especially to the private sector, and I'm referring here to the opportunities that are possible in the private sector to finance the innovations of the youth, the support to the SMEs, and so such initiative and other examples of other initiatives, be it in the Arab countries, and each and every Arab countries have such experience in the field. Some of them have strategies, and others have strategies underway and are working with the fund to craft this strategy. We hope that in the future we carry out other activities, and we see all these youth with their innovations, with their creations, not from other continents, but from the Arab universities and the Arab world. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Through the Minister, we'd like to thank all the Algerian government for the warm welcome. And you have to listen to the older. And I will start with the anecdote. It's not an anecdote, but it's a real story. That took place in 1971. We were in a university restaurant, and it was during lunch, and we started having a chat. A young girl said, my mother sent me, or sold me tomato. Just imagine a mother who sells tomatoes to her girl. At the time, we thought that this was a little bit crazy. Then I realized that it was me who was crazy, because this mother has educated her girl that nothing was free, that there was always something in exchange. But for us, whenever a baby starts crying, we offer him candy, and we keep doing that up to the age of 30. So on which basis are we really educating our sons and daughters? And this is even, we can find this even at the university, you know, where we offer degrees, and we offer marks and grades. So there is some work that needs to be done within the family. And then the school, which kind of teacher are we talking about? Does our teacher have this kind of culture? Has really been trained in this culture? So we must rethink the training of the teacher before thinking of the kind of education that we offer. He who does not have something cannot offer it. So there are two fundamental variables that we should bear in mind. And after, when a culture like this should be spread, it should be disseminated. It should not just be confined to an audience like this. So this should be broadcast in TV and in radios, and most of the time it is the youth who are born here, who go there, and they come back as somebody like Ulysses, who went to Japan, to the United States, and then he comes back. Does this mean that we must say our youth that they must go and come back later? So we must show models based on, and at the end of the day, the technologies allow us to use this diaspora without really having to ask them to come back physically. So this is why I would like to suggest that you are here in a conference, and we're told very often that conferences do not really add much. So what I would tell you that on the basis of your actions in Morocco, how can you support this youth? Yeah, I'm coming to that. What is the culture that we have in our countries? It's not the culture of change. It's the culture of continuity, including in our administrations. So that conservatism is within us. We have not instilled in our youth the culture of quick change. There is a great resistance to change. And if you ever carry out a reform, then people would all stand against you. Why do you want to reform? Because we do not have that culture of change. So we must educate our youth as part of the culture of change. Programs should change continuously in order for them to domesticate this culture of change. Because you're saying earlier that every 10 years there is a new technology, and they would say, why should you introduce a new technology? So we don't have this. We lack this culture. As for the case of Morocco, and they will conclude that we are putting an end to the compensation fund, and because a lot of people would take advantage of these funds, and that is subsidiaries. We must put an end to subsidies, and these subsidies will be targeted and give the money only to people who deserve that, instead for the rich and the middle class to take advantage of these funds, meaning that, so by removing this fund, we must incorporate another variable, that is to incorporate the vulnerable categories in this system of transforming mindsets, because we need to change the mindsets. If we do not change the mindsets of our citizens, school alone cannot really create the ecosystem. So you are, Madam the Director, from the World Bank, whenever we borrow money from the World Bank, and we do really do it in Morocco, and so we can get a loan, from the World Bank just to set up a TV in order which would aim at changing the mentalities, the mindsets. Thank you.
Bank and the host, the ministry, for hosting this very interesting conference. I come from Malta, where we have experienced this situation. Now we're in a position where youth unemployment is the lowest in the European Union, out of 28 countries, where the 90% of digital companies in the iGaming industry are all located in Malta, where Binance, the biggest blockchain fintech exchange, has announced by Bloomberg that it's moving to Malta. So what did we do? We were in the situation what we're discussing here before. I think it would be foolish to say that you don't need the education, or you don't need the finance or the infrastructure. Of course you need that. But I would say, compared to other things, they are doable. They are not impossible to do. Difficult, but you can move. I think the biggest obstacle, and we had to break that, is the ease of doing business, the obstacles in the way of doing business. The fact that you have a public sector which has, over the years since the Second World War, created a very important social welfare state, which is important, but then it starts strangling. If the public sector crowds out the private sector. So it's very difficult to let go, where subsidies are giving the wrong signals, an exchange rate which is not the correct one. These are all signals. So it's no use pushing in one way, and then you have all the forces against you. So there must be this environment. Find out how, of course, it's a very politically sensitive subject. We must admit that. But one needs to look at countries who have succeeded. If they did it, there's no reason why we too can do it in the region. Malta is only an hour and a half by plane, and we consider ourselves half belonging to the south and half belonging to the north, being at the center. So the issue also is about the regulator. Where we succeeded with iGaming is to create a regulatory authority different from the MFSA, different from the central bank, a specific regulator which understands the topic, which understands the entrepreneur, which has a rigorous regulatory framework, but at the same time enabling it. Now, Malta is announcing the first blockchain authority. And again, it's not the government being so smart and wise. We had to listen to the biggest entrepreneurs coming from China, from Hong Kong, from all over the world. They tell you what they need. They want the comfort of a regulatory framework, but which ease them to do business. And we listened, we get the best lawyers, and now the authority is in formation. It will be announced in the month of April. So yes, a specific regulatory authority helps in this respect. Of course, you'd need a level playing field. You don't want, unfortunately, the computer age has created giants, monsters, and wasn't so democratic. We're seeing and finding out. We just hope that the blockchain era will be more democratic. We will see from that. So it is doable, but don't miss the elephant in the room. You know, that is what's keeping the country or young people going forward. We've seen here very smart people, very smart young people, eager to go. We just need to give them the freedom to go ahead. That's it. Thank you.
Bismillah. I would like to express my thanks and gratitude to Algeria, its president, government, and people for the warm welcome and hospitality. And I'm very delighted, very delighted that Algeria is attaching a particular importance to this theme in cooperation with other parties which are closely related to this topic. I will be brief, and I would like to share our experience with you in Libya. We, as the state of Libya, consider ourselves as probably the weakest link as compared to our neighbors. We have tried to initiate an initiative and try to keep abreast with the modern technology. But in fact, we have focused on four main areas which have hindered our advance, our progress, because the education system in Libya does not really keep abreast with the global vision. The second is the problem with the regulatory framework. We are trying to implement a system which is not governed by any laws. The third issue has to do with the media and the way that they deal with the changes that are taking place in the world. So we're trying to endeavor and benefit from the experiences of other countries, and wish full success to your conference. Thank you. I would like, first of all, to thank the Algerian government for the warm welcome, and also for the choice of this theme, which is one of the important themes at present. Thank the Arab Monetary Fund, the World Bank, for being partners of this in this important work. The 2 days have been very useful because they have allowed us first to think together and also suggest concrete actions and action plans on which we can build together the future of this new economy. I wanted to, I will not put on the cap of the governor of the central bank, but I think that one of the constraints that we are facing today and which we are trying to sort out is this informal aspect of the economy, which goes through a cash payment, and this is a real problem. And this money is not only, and this money circulates not only inside the country, but also outside the country, and this issue was discussed at length. And even in terms of security, I see that these issues of digitalization and blockchain can really, or will allow us to sort out these problems, problems of security, and also tracking down this money. I think that there are a lot of things that we can do together on this issue, but I would like to get back to something which is more important. Our friend, His Excellency, Minister from Morocco, has told us an anecdote. I will tell you another small anecdote. 2 years ago, there was a summit in Tunisia, the famous summit on investment. I was part of a session on education, and there were a lot of investors, a lot of financial people, and there was a young man whose name is Yahya, who is 18 years old, who has taken the floor. He has taken the floor without any permission, and he said, "I need to speak to you and tell you what I'm doing on education." So Yahya, 18 years old, he had just had his A-levels, and so he said, "I'm not going to register at the university. I'm going to waste 1 year." Because he said, "I'm a specialist of codes for applications on smartphones." And at school or the university, there is no course on that. So he said, "I'm going to open a school." So Yahya decided not to go to university and open his own school. So he opened his own school, and Françoise and I, we went to visit his school 6 months ago, and we have discovered a world of youngsters who would go every Saturday there. And in the panel, there was a great polytechnic graduate who was a boss of a private bank, and he has just come to know Yahya, and he took the floor to tell him, "Me, my son, I must make extraordinary efforts in order to wake him up to go to school. The only day where he would wake me up up is when he decides to come and see you. So he was part of the Yahya school, which was part of another private institution. So there is a venture capital which put the money, and they are creating a new economy together with the youths who are 17 or 18 years old. The whole lectures are delivered in English, and it is the new generation which is taking this power, and which this generation, and neither the government has done that nor anybody else, they've done it. So I'm telling myself, this guy, Yahya, he could be Tunisian, Algerian, Lebanese, could be Saudi, and he's from our region, and I hope that we must see to it that we can all work together. As you said, there will be a financial inclusion, not only at the national level, but also at the regional level, because there are a lot of Yahyas who are in France and elsewhere. If we don't do it, then they will take away our Yahyas, and they will leave us, turn around. So I would call everybody that all the Yahyas get together and create the real wealth and allow our economies to develop. Thank you.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. في البداية أنا أعتذر جدا.
First of all, I apologize to the Honorable Minister and to all of you because I had a meeting, a side meeting that was important. First of all, I'd like to thank the Algerian government and the Algerian people for the gracious hospitality and the warm welcome for us, Yemen, precisely. I'm from Yemen, Minister of Industry and Trade. Have ties with our brothers in Algeria and close ties, and we are really proud of being here and delighted to hear from this young generation that bears potential, huge potential for changes. And we know that the changes that occurred in the Arab world, with its pains and sufferings and positive aspects as well, are born by these creative souls of our youngsters. What I would like to say in this short contribution, no doubt and no disagreement that, as it was said by John Hobbes, that knowledge is the power, and knowledge is the fuel of this power. And since the human being bears this power, if there is no social and political environment that is conducive to unleash this potential, it might turn to be obstacles and hurdles in any societies. The example of Yemen and even our brothers in Libya and other Arab countries also, when the youth had launched this spirit of change, they have encountered hostile forces, and as was said by my brother in Libya, we in Yemen, we are in a weak link when it comes to change, but we are confident that the change is coming because we have a huge young potential, or potential of youth. In this respect, we are talking about entrepreneurship, and you all know that Yemenis, even throughout history and even presently, are leaders, are pioneers in business. And all the leaders in business have created many institutions and companies in all Arab countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Qatar, Emirates, Saudi Arabia, in Africa, and even in the US, but in their own homeland, in their own country. they could not achieve such results, meaning that change and social development and progress require a conducive social environment. The human being, we know that human being is basically made of the brain. We have 1 billion neurons in our brain, and the brain is the fundamental aspect of any human being, therefore. But this human brain is not only some kind of technological layers that you can fuel with powers. If there is no institutional or social environment conducive to unleash this brain and to free it from any political pressures, it would become an obstacle and a hurdle to this very society. Therefore, during these 2 working days where we heard about the role of the youth in change, we see that the youth can play a major role if they are supported and helped by the institutions and the financial support. And it behoves on us as politicians to ensure this environment to our youth for them to succeed the changes in the Arab world. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Now, I know why Mr. Rabah invited me to this roundtable. Honorable Minister, I thank you very much for the hospitality. Your Excellency, the Vice President of the World Bank and the President of the Arab Monetary Fund, thank you very much for these working days. It is really fantastic to see officials today from Libya, from Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and our brothers and friends from Yemen. If I focus on North Africa, may I add Malta. Malta, that looks at the North Africa from Europe and looking to Europe from North Africa. So economically speaking, it is part of our ecosystem. Let me focus on North Africa with your permission to reach concrete things. You invited me to this roundtable. You will just bear with me. I will make some concrete proposals. The governor talked about Yahya, and earlier on you heard Riyadh and fantastic young people. And this reminded me of the founder of Huawei some 20 years back. This is exactly what he did. The founder of Huawei, some 20 years ago, said, there is technology, I'm going to start copying it and then implement it in my country. And today Huawei is the biggest equipment provider in the world. So what you saw is open source technology implemented by Algerians for Algerian needs and requirements without paying any hard currency or buying anything, and that could be used in Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, and other countries. But to do so, some prerequisites are necessary, and I do have 3 concrete proposals that would enable Yahya and Riyadh and others to do so more quickly, and we would have done our job. When Yahya sends an email to Riyadh, it won't go from Tunis to Algiers. It goes to Marseille and then go back to Tunis. Each email that we exchange in North Africa would go through Marseille. Whereas we have a fiber optic cable, we have increased the capacity of this cable together with Madame the Minister of Technologies. But we really need this infrastructure, a fiber optic infrastructure, to have it and to have it in terabytes instead of megabytes. We need to invite the internet service providers to use it, because this will make us save money and work together better. So we won't be surprised to have more work in Europe, whereas we do not have enough interaction among us in the Northern African region. The second proposal for Yahya and Riyadh to be able to work together, and Ali from Morocco and Mohammed from Libya, then there should be common funds for investment, for investing in startups, not only for Libya, for Tunisia, etc. No, we have to demand North African funds and capital for startups, and to oblige them through this financial means to work together. It is the only way that we could really create South-South cooperation and the economic Maghreb unity. Because, of course, it is good to see that we see that Libyans do not have 6 million people. They have 100 million people. It's the same for Tunisia, for Morocco, for Algeria. So, funds for startups, seeds, pre-seed, etc., at all levels. And the third proposal is when Yahya and Riyadh make a transaction, their transactions are blocked, are frozen, are blocked at the level of central banks, I'm sorry to say so, because for each transaction, the central bank, be it from one country or the other, will have to do it invoice per invoice. Why can't we, for instance, for example, have some sort of clearinghouse starting by 2 countries and then 3 countries, and then we're at the end of the month or the quarterly or at the end of the year, the 2 governors of the central banks will make their accounts and pay what should be paid, and not create obstacles. The entrepreneurs for each payment, they will have to wait 1 week, whereas when they do it with other countries, it will be much easier. And if they do it in the parallel or the informal market, it's even quicker. So a clearinghouse, I'm not asking you to say yes now, but sincerely, please just put these 3 proposals into consideration. First, the physical connection among the countries. 2, Maghrebian funds and clearinghouse among the central banks in order to expedite the trade among the countries, and especially when it comes to this new economy. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup
Thank you very much for your contributions. If there is no other remark right away among the panelists, I would like to say a word to try to sum up. Well, this theme of breaking isolation through the interconnection, or to break these cultural problems, these mindset problems, interconnection is the best concrete way of, because Yahya was connected or linked to a mentor. This what helped him. So, break the isolation, the physical isolation of telecoms between the countries, in remote areas, among the countries, to avoid this digital gap, and the payment system interconnectivity among the countries also, and inside the countries as well is important. To start to open the discussion with the floor, yesterday Mustafa Nabi touched on this. We talked about the informal sector. The informal sector is so wide in our economies, and that these technological changes wake us up in the change of regulations. A driver from KARIM or Uber will need a statute, a different status. We need to rethink these regulations on the status of a driver of Uber or KARIM. And this might be useful for us to understand in what extent the informal sector may become formal, may become normal. And the suggestion of Mustafa was to stop thinking as in a Bismarckian perspective, but to see this formal aspect just around the employment, but to have minimal coverage on the healthcare, on the retirement and pension, but not around the jobs only. This approach, that is to rethink regulations for the new economy, can enable to include these new inputs, these new workers of this new economy, and maybe to also normalize the informal sector. On these issues of regulations, maybe we can hear from the participants. And the other aspect, it was on the discussion that we had with Kamran. I will give him the floor, if possible, on tomorrow's university, the University of the Future. We talk of rethinking the curricula, but maybe concretely, how can we introduce this new economy into the schools, into the universities? And it would be desirable, to my opinion, to include these new entrepreneurs in tomorrow's schools to make it develop. May we give the floor to Mr. Cameron, and then I will open the floor to discussions for short inputs, and then we go back to the panel.
Well, since we are talking about concrete steps, we talked about Yahyas, and I totally agree with you. As I travel around the region, I see so many Yahyas. And when I say so many, really, I'm talking about not one or two, but hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands. And if Yahyas are so good that they go and create their own university of future because they believe that is what is needed, why shouldn't we help them with funding? Because Dr. Ziad showed the students which are so talented in here. I just asked him if within his students they had each a few $1,000s to get what they learned from Smart City into a project, how many new companies could be created and how many new jobs would be created. So as part of concrete actions, there are 7 honorable ministers on the stage. Can I have a commitment from each one of you in your own country that if you don't know, I will help you find the Yahyas in your country, and you give me a commitment to give them $1 million for each one of those Yahyas in your country within the next 12 months. Let's create $1 million micro fund for each one of the Yahyas in your country. 1 Yahya per country, 12 months. That $1 million, I help find that Yahya, if you don't know them or her already, and let's help her take that $1 million and make 100 investments, each investment $10,000, to create 100 new companies, and each company hires 5 to 10 young people who don't have jobs. That's 5 to 10,000 jobs in high tech. I make the commitment to come and help you find those Yahyas. If you make the commitment, and I want to hear from each one of you, join this new approach to help create the innovation economy in your country? I'm waiting. Which one of you is going to raise his hand? Which one of you is raising his hand? I want concrete actions. Okay, I already heard from, thank you, sir. I make a commitment to come to Libya and help you with finding your Yahyas and create jobs there. Who else?
Merci.
Who else? I want to see some courage. If there were, I guarantee you, if there were 7 women sitting there, every single one of them would raise their hand because women care about the children. Where is some courage? Come on. Who else?
They're coming. They're coming. Give them some time. Kamran. So just on that point, taking this very seriously, again, we talked about funds of funds and a fund for the region. I'm taking this very seriously. So at lunch, we discussed the law of unicorn, the idea that in approaching startup or incubator, we need to target the many and not be selecting a few. So I really take that point that indeed being inclusive in giving a chance to startup at a very large scale and casting a very wide net is the way to go. So this gives me the great honor to give the floor to Xavier, who is the regional director for IFC, and in fact is our private arm. So maybe you can shed some light on that new approach of casting a wide net in
Thank you very much. So I think that the idea to create a Maghreb platform of startup, je vais peut-être continuer en français.
I will probably carry on in French, that is set up a regional Maghreban platform for startups, which would be supported by incubators and by a regional fund, because in fact the Maghreb, although it is the least integrated region in the world, have so many things in common, and we have to work together. We in the IFC, as I said it yesterday, we think that there is a regional space in order to create regional VC startups which could meet every 6 months to share experience and which could find some business locally, because there are a lot of resources in Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, and we can achieve these beautiful projects together. Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah. I'm Mahmoud Abu Al-Uyun. I'm the economic advisor for the AMF in Kuwait. I'm not an IT person, but the idea that I can take away from this conference is empowering the youth, and the empowerment which we are thinking of as old people are probably different from the ideas of the youth. This is why what was presented now in the panel on the role of governments in empowering the youth is the most important element as concerns the issue at hand. And during the present discussion, there was an idea that the government could be a regulator, and instead of talking about regulators, especially that some of your officials are at the officials of the central bank, we think that the government should be an enabler and a facilitator rather than being only a regulator. And as it is said now, as concerns social media, and the opinions that are expressed here and there. So at the end of the day, the government would set a regulatory framework, but it shouldn't really prevent the youth from creating businesses. The second point, and which was also raised during the discussion by the panel, are the financing funds, and I have the honor of working for the Economic Development Fund, and we do have a special account for small and medium projects with $1.5 billion, which is ready to fund new entrepreneurs who join this activity. And from here, I must say that governments can benefit, and also enterprises can benefit from this fund. The third point, which I would like to raise here, has to do with the technological aspects, and they have been raised by His Excellency, the Tunisian Minister, that is the electronic connection and the connection of the various networks. And I can speak about something that exists and which has been set up by Arab countries, that is a power connection between Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. So why shouldn't there be an Arab project for connection between all Arab countries in a horizontal way, instead of going upward to Malta or elsewhere where there are fiber optic networks? Why shouldn't we benefit from the power connection and grid itself, where we would lay internet connections and connect the platforms that exist? And I forgot to thank Minister Abdurrahman Rawia for inviting the Arab Fund. Thank you. Shall we take other questions or other comments? Yes, please. Thank you very much. It's not a question, it's a suggestion. If you allow me, wouldn't be interesting, Mr. Rabah? Wouldn't it be interesting? It's not a question, it's just a suggestion. After all that has been suggested, in terms of innovation, wouldn't it be interesting to hear the youngsters that we saw earlier, in order to share with us their constraints and also tell us what would they like us to do for them? This is a suggestion. I agree. The purpose of the platform is to move to a greater scale and try to bring together all this energy and all these needs. Indeed. Yes, there are two over there. Microphone.
Bonjour à vous. Je suis un des étudiants.
Good afternoon. I'm one of the students who was part of the panel. I would like to thank the panelists for their very interesting ideas. I just want to get back to an issue that was raised by the Moroccan minister, who talked about students leaving for abroad. And it's been 2 months since I've been trying to go. Why our students are trying to go abroad. And I think that we should take this as a priority and sort out this problem instead of I think that among the priority issues that need to be examined is why Algerian students, and this applies to Moroccan and Tunisian students, why are these students trying to go abroad? We'll take one last question. Yes. And then get back to the panel if they have anything to add. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rabah. I do represent the chambers of commerce and economy in the Gulf Council. I would like to thank the AMF, the World Bank, and the officials for inviting to us, and thank all the experts for the success stories that they have presented and the role of the youth in the process of change. I think, Excellencies, that there should be a role for the Arab private sector. All of you are officials, ministers, and experts. What about the role of the Arab private sector? All the changes that are taking place in the world are done on the basis of initiatives by the private sector. His Excellency, the Minister of Commerce and Industry from Minister, has spoken about Yemenites who do succeed abroad but do not succeed in their own countries because of the absence of the private sector, the role of the private sector. So I would request that a special focus be placed on the role of the private sector. Mr. Abu Al-Ainain has said that this fund has $2 billion. We in our center have made a lot of initiatives that have not been taken into account. Thank you. I thank you. The role of the private sector. All the conference was dedicated to the presence of the private sector. I will probably ask the panelists once again.
I'd like to explain what was asked by Cameron. He did not ask $1 million for each entrepreneur. He asked for $1 million for 100 entrepreneurs. That is $10,000 per each. Therefore, as private sector, as Tunisian private sector, as you know, we started this, and we will do so, and I will confirm that we will do so in the private sector, because this is what is done anyway. We need to expedite the process only. Thank you. I can't have a microphone and not say anything. Two important points that have been said, and I think that we need really to act on these. The first one is the participation, the involvement of the youth and the private sector in crafting the policies. The young man who said that all our young people would like to go abroad and have their studies abroad. We need to know why they want to go abroad and what we can do to make sure that these potential remain in our country. Same story for the private sector. We cannot, as experts, remain in our offices. We cannot find the solutions. The solutions are with the young people and the private sectors, and the platform that we have been talking about and that I wish will be successful, we should play this role of discussing and taking the point of views of the youth and the private sector. This is the most important thing I wanted to say regarding the financing or funding $1 million for 100 students or entrepreneurs. We are ready to finance such initiatives, such projects. We are already working. I'm talking about the World Bank Group, not only the IBRD, but also the IFC. It's just an announcement. The Tunisian Central Bank is organizing on the 14th and the 15th a blockchain summit in which we will have almost all the African central banks. This summit will be held in a month's time, and you are all kindly invited.
شكرا. أنا أتفق مع ما ذكرته القاعة بأن
I do agree what the participants said. The private sector is actually important. It is even one of the three dimensions for any state. For any mature society, we have the government, the private sector, and the civil society. But I'd like to focus on the role of the private sector. It's not only a partner in our countries, it is a stakeholder, it is a partner, it is a stakeholder. But therefore, the private sector should not expect to have the environment released and conducive. They have themselves to contribute in making this environment conducive once. The other point I wanted to touch on that the Arab countries do not have a problem of funds, of finances. We know that the we do not have this problem of finance. So therefore, we need to wonder what makes it that this money goes outside or abroad instead of remaining within the countries to be used within the countries. Thank you. Well, actually, we in Libya, and the question goes to the World Bank. The youth have initiatives who do not have a system to be connected to this youth. Mr. Cameron gave us an example, a model, and we are ready to adopt it. We need to have criteria. We have to have ways and tools to get connected to these people, to this youth, for us to do something concretely. Thank you. I'll try and give a kind of answer to this young man who asked why our young people would like to go abroad. I was a former Minister of Education and Scientific Research. I noticed that we have 65,000 students, 33,000 of them in France, and more than 4,000 in Ukraine. In this country, there is a war, but you still find students, Moroccan students there. How can this be possible? 5 billion dirhams is invested officially, and not to speak about the unofficial, informal sectors. Therefore, I decided to attract the foreign universities. Izensa, for instance, provides 43 teachers, and this is financed by Morocco. We have also the architecture school with Florence or Florencia, and we have the Central School of Paris. We have ESSEC in Paris, and we are also trying to get or to attract Anglophone universities, and a great number of African students, instead of going to Europe, would come to Morocco. Therefore, we have to endeavor to find an alternative to the people who would like to go abroad. Otherwise, we waste a lot of money. I had a budget of 9 billion dirhams as Minister of Education, and the money that is used for registration and the school fees is 5 billion. With all this money, I could have had an excellent university. Therefore, the problem is that we need to share the experiences of others, and maybe we can find alternatives. Instead of our students going to Ukraine, we can our students will go to the Maghrebian countries, and we can have exchanges among our universities, and we can do without other teachers. We have problems, and I'm talking about Morocco. in our universities, we only can have Moroccan teachers. So you go to Singapore, and in one university, you can have 40 nationalities, 40 nationalities of different teachers in Singapore University. If you don't have a teacher in a specialty, what can you do? This is a problem in Morocco, in the Moroccan universities. You cannot have any foreign teacher. Therefore, now what we have is that we have the private sector and private universities having foreign teachers with huge salaries, of course. Thank you.
With your permission, some activities that are organized by the Arab Monetary Fund, we realized that several of our youngsters have very good innovations, but they do need to make these innovations known. We have had a conference 2 months ago in the Kingdom of Morocco in cooperation with the IMF and also the Ministry of Finance in Morocco, and there was a competition for the youth innovation, and during 6 weeks we have had about 60 youths who had various innovations, and we had to select 4 among these innovations. There was a difficulty in setting up the criteria for selection. Then we ended up by selecting 4, and it was so innovations do not only take place in the most developed countries. These innovations can also take place in any country. So we do rely on the various institutions to play their role, including the AMF, and that such institutions organize such activities in order, and of course, these innovations, these 4 innovations, have been made known, and we hope that such initiatives and that such initiative and activities in order for us to know the capacities of innovations that we have and the potentials, but unfortunately these innovations have been used outside the country of origin. Apparently, we're heading to the conclusions. So the last word, please. The last word, and I have the privilege of saying the last words. I will not conclude entirely, but based on what we heard here from the audience, there is no doubt that the new technologies are the engine for growth. This is quite clear. We must act in an environment, in a healthy environment, and a lot of change should be introduced during this period. We're not talking here about only equipment, software, and this goes without saying. What is quite certain is that the mindsets change, and the environment should change, regulations should change as well. I think that we are all aware of this problem. Regulation or simplified regulation and procedures in order for us to move forward, and a new stage in sharing, in trade, with a total transparency in our rules. And finally, to conclude on all these aspects, I think that the issue, or the main issue, is trust. We should have trust in one another. That is private sector, startups, banks, all the sectors that are involved in the development of countries should should have mutual trust among themselves in the region, in the continent, and in this moving world, wherever the person is. If the person wants to do good, he or she can. Thank you.
Merci, Messieurs les ministres. Merci, Messieurs.
Thank you, honorable ministers. Thank you, governors, the vice president, the director, and the president of the AMF. Thank you very much for having been here with us. And we hope to see you soon, and we hope this was an interesting seminar for you. I'd like to invite our friends from the media to remain in the room. We will have the Minister of Finance, the Vice President of the World Bank.
Messieurs, un petit changement, un ultime et un dernier changement dans le programme. Monsieur le
Last
ministre des
minute
Finances fait un discours de
change in our program. We will have the closing
reprendre
remarks
place, si vous
of the
voulez bien,
minister.
afin de suivre le
May I
discours de
invite you
clôture
to listen
qui est donné
to
par le
him,
ministre des
please?
Finances. Merci.
Thank you.
Please stay with us. The very final speech is going to be given by the Algerian Ministry of Finances. So thank you to stay with us for the final allocution. Thank you.
S'il vous plaît. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة.
Your Excellencies, Your Excellencies, Mr. Abdurrahman Al-Hamidi, Director General of the Arab Bank, Mr. Hafid Ghanem, Vice Chairman of the World Bank, governors of central banks, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Over 2 days, we have had the honor of hosting the regional forum on the new economy of the MENA region, youth and finance. This forum has allowed, through the field expertise, which was reflected by the interventions of the various experts who have honored us by their presence in our country, without forgetting to mention the quantitative and qualitative participation of Algerian youth in order to benefit from the experiences and the expertise in new economy. These proceedings have focused on the concerns of our countries. This is a reflection of the importance that we attach to this issue, and this is testified by the patronage that was granted by His Excellency, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelaziz Bouteflika. And also, this attachment is reflected through our preparation to materialize the opportunities for investment in this area, which will pave the way before an important section of our society as it was referred to by His Excellency the Prime Minister yesterday, and the intensification of labor opportunities through the diversification of our economy, especially because of the challenges that are imposed by the present circumstances, which encourage us to overcome our focusing on hydrocarbons. We are quite aware that investment in new economy should lead us to the changing of the university curricula and the introducing of digitalization, and also the improvement of doing business, and also the help of SMEs and SMIs in the area of innovation, and also gender equality. All these themes, which represent the concerns of MENA, are a platform which call on the need of setting up economic policies which would help us overcome the difficulties and obstacles which the youth are facing. We hope that the conclusions and the proposals that have emanated from the proceedings of this forum will have a good echo in order for them to be materialized. At the end, I would like to express my thanks and gratitude to all the participants in this forum, experts, project holders, and the officials who have been very keen on sharing with us their experiences and their proposals on the theme of this forum. I would like to thank Mr. Hafez Ghanem, Vice President of the World Bank, and Abdurrahman Al-Hamidi, Chairman of the IMF, and their various institutions and their efforts for the organization of this forum. I would like also to express my thanks and gratitude to all those who have contributed directly or indirectly to the organization of this forum, and wish a very pleasant stay for our guests, and wish them a very good fly back home. Thank you. Flight back home. Thank you.
Oui, je vous en prie. Monsieur le ministre. Le panneau qui a c'est mieux. Voilà, déclaration. Voilà. Aziz.
تاخد لنا صورة. معلش تاخد لنا صورة.
She wants a picture.
يلا.
D'accord.
Là, c'est bon.